I'm Tara Hamilton, and today we're going to teach you how to make sprouted black wild rice without cooking it with curry sauce and then greens. We're going to use 3 different kinds of kale. We're also going to use some broccoli rabe, and so you can diversify and do whatever you want, but let's get started and start off with the sauce. How's everybody doing today? Good. Okay, so we are going to make a curry sauce, but I think last time we diversified. The girls made it. I have to be quite honest with you. I didn't make the sauce. And they made it a thick sauce. That's not really what I have in mind because I like Thai food. And so Thai food, when they do the rice, the stir-fried rice and stuff like that, they always have a runny sauce. And that's what I'm after in my head. So that's what we're going to go with. So we need coconut milk for that, and we always make our own fresh one. So we take 4 cuts into the coconut. Okay, we make a square. Now you don't need it to be that big if you're just drinking the water, but because we scrape out the meat, we do like the circle to be quite large. And we're going to pour it right through here. Okay, so that's the coconut water. That's not coconut milk in and of itself. We have these handy dandy spatulas. They're made of a hard plastic, and you insert it like this into one edge of your coconut, and you scrape all the way around. Now some coconuts will have more meat and some coconuts will have less. So if some of your coconuts have less meat, then you may just have to drink the water of one of the coconuts and use the meat of an extra one. But I think we're going to be okay today. So it usually comes out in one fairly long piece. You want to check it, because a lot of times wood from the coconut itself will attach to it. And wood catches underneath the S-blade in your food processor. So in the Vitamix, this happens a little bit faster. While we're waiting for that to go on, we're going to start prepping our garlic and our ginger. We use one of these peelers, which is really handy because it doesn't take too much of the skin off of ginger. Usually I say a thumb-sized piece. To me, that's a thumb-sized piece. So that's what I cut off of it before, and I just roughly chop it, and you can go ahead and add it. Okay, then we also want to use some garlic. If you like it spicier, you can use more garlic, but I usually start with one full head of garlic. We go ahead. After we separate it, we squish it with our knife. That makes it easier to peel, and it starts awakening the garlic. Ideally, what you would have done is you would have done this half an hour or an hour before you were going to use it, so all those enzymes would be as active as possible. Just crushing it a little bit makes the skin start to come off. So in most Indian food and in most Thai food, ginger and garlic is absolutely necessary. It's something that you should incorporate into almost all your cooking and uncooking because they are superfoods. Garlic is a natural antibiotic, especially in the wintertime. You want it for boosting your immune system. If you're using the Vitamix, you don't have to peel. Usually what I do is I save all these little ones and I throw them in the Vitamix because they're hard to peel just individually. But in the food processor, I find that the peel does not dissolve. So you do want to make sure that you've properly peeled your garlic. And we do roughly chop them when we put them into the food processor because you don't want a big chunk of it to get caught on one of the food processor blades. So we're going to go ahead. We have our water and the meat of 4 coconuts inside the food processor. We have a thumb-sized piece of ginger, and now we have a whole head of garlic, and that's going in there. We already have garlic and we have ginger, so we don't need to use too much else. I'm going to guesstimate about 1.5 teaspoons of salt, but I'll start with 1. And then we're going to go with 3/4 teaspoon of chipotle chili. If you're using cayenne, you would probably use about 1/4 teaspoon. And if you're using paprika, you could go with 3/4 teaspoons. And we're going to use turmeric. That was it. And of course, the turmeric is what gives it the nice curry color. I don't know how many of you know this, but Thai food is a mixture of Chinese food and Indian food. Some people like their curry to be really, really yellow. I think that this is the color of a natural curry. just a pale yellow. So if you'd like it to be a lot darker, then go ahead and just add some more turmeric and it would be that dark color. So right now you can tell from what I just did that it's a runny sauce. And I'm just gonna let it run for a minute longer because it's not as smooth as if it was in the Vitamix, but we're gonna make a roux. And usually to make a roux in cooked food, you use flour and you use water. And in raw food, we use nuts. In this particular dish, we're going to use cashews. So liquid-wise, what you wanna remember is the proportions. To thicken something, we had at least 4 cups of liquid, right? Because we had 4 cups of coconut water, and then we had the meat. If you've got 4 cups of liquid, you need 2 cups of nuts. And you can tell when your nuts are ground well enough because you see there's a ball and it's spinning around. So usually, it looks like a flour. Just as if you had picked up flour and water. Isn't that what it looks like when it's in your pan? That's what you want your nuts to look like. So even if you're using almonds, you want to soak them so that they're really soft and they'll go like that. So let us see. So this now, see, it's just not like a watery kind of a thing. It is still a sauce, there's no doubt about it, but it's just got some texture to it. So. It's very good. It needs some salt. So I'm going to start with another ½ teaspoon. Remember when I started the recipe, I said that I thought it was going to take 1½ teaspoons of salt, but I didn't want to over salt it, so I was going to start with 1. That's great. Now you can't taste the spice anymore. So what I did is I took those tomatoes that I told you about, and we dehydrate them in the summertime because we know we're going to need them in the winter. And I soaked them in just enough water to cover them because I knew I was going to use my soak water. So I will measure it for you because I know that's going to be your next question. Soaked tomatoes. I would use 3/4 of a cup in this much. A cup would be too much. So you could stop the sauce right there, but you can also go ahead and make it super deluxe. And now our sauce looks like a red curry almost, doesn't it? And now it's thicker because the sun-dried tomatoes made it thicker. And I'm the only one that gets to taste it right now. That's really good. Now when we add that, we have to add a bit more salt because now we've added tomatoes, we've added a new ingredient that's increased the volume, but we haven't added salt. So I'd go with 1/4 teaspoon. So even though you've only got 24 ounces, which is 3 cups, 3 cups of rice in here, you will fill all the way up to here with the water. And do you want to see what it looks like after it's sprouted? I should leave you a little bit here so you can have a visual demonstration. So when it sprouts, it looks like that. And it's gorgeous because you'll notice that it starts to curl around just like a seed or a tendril will. Some will stay straight and just turn a paler color because right now all those are pretty much black and they turn a slightly lighter color and they're white, and people say, well, you've cooked it. No. So all I want you to do is in a container and you can't put too much water. You notice that I can just drain the water off. You can put too little water, you can't put too much water. So if you're using 1 cup of rice, I would suggest a minimum of 8 to 10 cups of water. Put it in your container, and if you have a dehydrator, set your dehydrator to 120 degrees and leave that rice with that water overnight. The next morning, it will look like this. If you don't have a dehydrator, some people say this, your oven probably sets for 150, right? So just put it in there for less time. You'll have to watch it a little bit or prop the oven door open just a little bit so the internal temperature would be about 120. And if you want your black wild rice to sprout faster, then you can use warm water. When you put that 1 cup of wild rice in it, you could use 8 to 10 cups of warm water. That way it'll come up to heat to 120 degrees much quicker. Okay? Got our sauce done, we've got our rice done, and now we're gonna do our vegetables. So a lot of people think, okay, well if I'm gonna use kale, I have to cook it, because if I don't cook it, we're gonna have a problem. In this bowl, I went ahead and I put several greens. So even when you're thinking that this is curried kale, we're gonna have 3 different kinds of kale. Isn't that awesome? Okay, So what I usually do is I just cut the bottom again, like that. And then I strip it. You didn't have to cut it, but I just find that sometimes it makes it easier. If it's really long stems of curly kale, then I don't cut them at all, because then I want the grip on it. And so you want to strip the kale from the stem. Now, how many people think that they could never eat that many greens on wild rice? But I'm telling you, this many, so we had 4 bunches, is only enough for 1 or 2 people. So, how do we get it to have that cooked taste? We use salt, and you're gonna ask me to measure. So I will do that for you. 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Anybody see a color difference between? So this one here looks like this now, right? The curly kale looks like this now. The Masuna looks like this now. And okay? So now we know that they're all done. And we don't like to waste, so now we're gonna massage our other 4 properly into our bowl. So if you're going to use any raw onion in sauce, I would always recommend that you use chives, maybe a little tiny bit of leek. But if you're gonna use it in raw food, what we do is we take our onion, we slice it, and then we massage it with coconut palm sugar. So I showed you some of it ahead of time. And then you could saute it gently in your pan if you don't have a dehydrator. Just make sure that you can always touch the bottom of the pan. If your fingers can tolerate the heat at the bottom of your pan, then you haven't gone past 118. Okay, now the next thing I told you we were gonna use was broccoli rabe. So the nice thing about broccoli rabe, let's say we're going to use, this one has a bigger stalk, this one not so big. So we do cut off the really huge part of the stalk. There's just not much we can do with that. And this one, you are going to slice it. I like to do it at an angle because it's kind of pretty when you do it like that. But the nice thing about the broccoli rabe is that you can use the leaves, you can use the actual broccoli, and you can use the stem. And so when you get up to these leaves up top here, I usually just roll them and I keep chopping. We massage it. And how much lemon juice? 1/8 of a cup. And how much salt? Okay, great. See, I don't even have to tell you the recipe anymore. Now what we do with the broccoli, the kale, it was ready to go as soon as we finished massaging it. You would have wanted to do the broccoli ahead of time and then let it sit for 2 hours. So you'll notice that my bowls are all about the same size, like that one, yeah, is the same as those ones. What I would do is I would put the broccoli in one of these bowls and then I would sit the next bowl on top of it. And what that would do is it would cut off any air from getting to my broccoli and it would force the lemon juice, which is acting like an acid, to cook my broccoli. So that's why we do that. So with our carrots, I usually line up all the tops and then I top them and then I tail them. Okay? You can decide if you'd like to peel them or not. So usually the ones that don't get sliced sit on top. And we use the slicing feature of our food processor. And we'll go ahead, and any big pieces like that, I remove them because it's a texture thing. And the rest of the pieces can get tossed into your basket. Now this is entirely optional. You don't have to do it, but they're really nice small pieces. So when they're that small, you're probably not going to have too much crunch. And if you really wanted to multitask this, I mean, this would taste delicious just as a salad. So anything that you didn't use on top of your wild rice, you could save and use as a salad, right? So that's how it looks. Doesn't that look pretty? Now, doesn't that look gorgeous? And it really didn't take that long, right? Now, if they served this to you at a Thai restaurant, would anybody guess that it hadn't been cooked? No. So that's really great. And we can do it with different vegetables. You could do it with zucchini in the summertime, yellow summer squash. You could do it with celery. You could do it with a lot of things, right? Celery and carrots, you want to make sure that they're always sliced really, really fine so that they're not too crispy.